In a land where presidents vanish overnight, where coups erupt before the morning call to prayer, where gold flows like rivers beneath the soil, but children still die from preventable diseases, one man is still standing. Ibrahim Traore, a 34-year-old captain, has faced armed insurrections, foreign pressures, and whispers in the barracks. But he hasn't just survived, he's grown stronger. Why? Because he did the unthinkable. He fought alongside his men. He listened to his people, and above all, he believed in something bigger than himself. They tried to isolate him. He built alliances. They tried to scare him. He gave speeches. Now his army doesn't just salute him, they bleed for him. His people don't just vote, they shield him. And across Burkina Faso, murals appear, unprompted, Sankara's eyes, beside Traoré's jawline. Past and future, staring down the present. What protects a leader in a place where loyalty is for sale? Belief. Belief in dignity, in defiance, in the unbreakable soul of a continent. So if you've ever wondered what a revolution looks like when it walks on two legs, stay with us. This story doesn't just speak, it marches. Subscribe. Not just for a video, but for a vision of a free Africa. In many African capitals, the military is a threat to be contained. In Burkina Faso, it is the backbone of a revolution. Most leaders keep their distance. They speak of defense in press briefings, pose with generals during national holidays, then retreat behind armored doors. Not Ibrahim Traore. When insurgents opened fire in the north, he didn't send orders from Ouagadougou. He put on a uniform, he picked up a rifle, and he stood shoulder to shoulder with men in the dirt. That moment changed everything, because loyalty in Africa's armies is rare. Fear can be bought, allegiance can be faked, but belief, that is earned. The Cobra unit, an elite battalion forged in the chaos of insurgency, doesn't protect Traoré because they're told to. They protect him because he is one of them. They were shaped not by diplomatic meetings or NATO manuals, but by sleepless nights in trenches, by whispering final prayers before dawn raids, by patching each other's wounds with nothing but dirt and cloth. And Traoré was there. He didn't arrive with speeches, he arrived with scars. That built something no foreign-trained officer can replicate: faith in a leader who walks not above, but beside. But it didn't stop there. Traoré knew that unity in the ranks isn't enough if the system is sick, so he cut the rot at its root. Gone are the French trainers. Gone are the NATO consultants. In their place, a leaner, locally trained force, promoted not by bloodlines or political favor, but by one measure. Do you believe in a Burkina Faso that answers only to its people? Under Traoré, the armed forces are no longer a fragmented relic of colonial command. They are unified by doctrine, one of anti-imperial sovereignty, self-determination, and internal trust. Even the way troops are deployed has changed. Instead of relying on foreign advisors, new battalions have been placed in the most volatile regions, not just to fight insurgents, but to reclaim forgotten territory. These soldiers don't march through villages as occupiers. They arrive as proof that the state has not abandoned its people, because when a nation disappears, it doesn't vanish with explosions. It fades when no one comes. Traoré understood this, so he came. He didn't offer promises, he offered presence. And that is why, despite coup attempts, infiltrations, and pressure from abroad, no one has cracked his inner military circle. Because they're not just guarding his body, they're guarding their future. A future they bled for. A future they were told could never exist without Western support. A future they now believe is possible. So when you ask what protects Ibrahim Traoré, the answer isn't just weapons. It's the will of men who've seen too much to go back. You can have soldiers at the gate, but that gate means nothing if the people behind it no longer care who holds the keys. In most countries, when the presidency is under threat, the streets fall silent. People withdraw. They wait. They watch. But in Burkina Faso, when word spread of a new coup attempt in early 2025, the first to move were not men in uniform. They were mothers, market vendors, unemployed youth, students with no political party, elders who remember Sankara's voice on a dusty radio. They surged to the streets not to protest, but to protect. They didn't chant, they dared. Dared the conspirators to try. Dared the world to see. Dared history to repeat. And vowed it wouldn't. This kind of mobilization can't be bought with slogans or staged rallies. It comes from pain. It comes from memory. From the broken promises of decades where gold left the ground but the schools had no chalk. Where foreign aid arrived but clean water never did. Where leaders held summits but never the hands of their own people. And then something shifted. Murals appeared on alley walls, not commissioned but spontaneous. Portraits of Thomas Sankara beside Ibrahim Traore, one martyr, one soldier, one spirit, because belief had returned. Not blind loyalty, not party propaganda, but belief in a revolution unfinished, and now reignited. Traore didn't win this with charisma, he won it with rejection. Rejection of colonial contracts, rejection of French troops, rejection of ECOWAS's toothless diplomacy, rejection of foreign aid dressed as dependence. In the eyes of his people, this wasn't policy, it was revenge. Revenge against every form of humiliation their nation endured. And when humiliation ends, something sacred begins: dignity. That's what fuels the streets of Ouagadougou. That's why when tanks threatened the palace, it was not fear that spread, it was fire. This civic awakening has restructured power itself. In most states, when a president stumbles, people step back. In Burkina Faso, when Traore stumbles, they step forward. That shift terrifies plotters more than any rifle. Because you can bribe a general, you can buy a politician, but you cannot assassinate a crowd's conviction. Even across the diaspora, in France, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, Burkina are raising funds, broadcasting speeches, spreading the message. Not for a man, for a moment. One they refuse to see extinguished. And when belief spills across borders, when it enters WhatsApp groups, sermons, schoolyards, it ceases to be national. It becomes elemental. What protects Traore then isn't just the people's love. It's their pain, their memory, their refusal to return to the silence of before. In the chessboard of West Africa, most pieces move alone, and one by one, they fall. That's how foreign actors like it. Isolated leaders, divided regions, and no unified defense. But something changed when Ibrahim Traore met two other men, Colonel Assimi Goïta of Mali and General Abdourahmane Chiani of Niger. They didn't meet in luxury hotels. They met through war, through isolation, through the shared understanding that alone was a death sentence. Together they formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES. Not a diplomatic gesture, not a photo op, a survival pact. This wasn't a treaty born in air-conditioned conference rooms. It was born under drone strikes, under sanctions, under the threat of being removed, silently, like so many others. The AES was their answer. Its message was simple: touch one and you touch all three. This was no exaggeration. Since its formation, the AES has begun synchronizing military training, integrating intelligence networks, and preparing joint border protocols. It is not just an alliance, it is a firewall. Because Traore knows, if a coup removes him, it's not just Burkina Faso that bleeds. The very credibility of the AES collapses. And that makes his presidency indispensable. For the first time, a West African head of state is not just guarded by his own soldiers, but by regional consequences. Foreign planners can no longer consider removing him surgical. It's now radioactive. Because the AES is not just about defense, it's about defiance. All three countries have exited ECOWAS. The regional bloc, once hailed as Africa's hope, but long accused of being a puppet of French and Western interests. They are now discussing a shared currency independent of the CFA franc, a relic of colonial economics still binding African economies to Paris. They are pushing for nationalized control over gold, uranium, cotton, and cobalt. They are investing in refining, not just exporting. That single change, refining instead of shipping raw, has the potential to transform GDPs across the region. But it's not just about money, it's about who controls the story. And so, the AES has built its own media ecosystem. State-run broadcasters in all three nations now amplify each other, exposing coup plots, confronting Western narratives, and uniting citizens across artificial borders. In this web of military, economic, and informational collaboration, Traore is no longer just the president of Burkina Faso. He is a pillar. Remove him, and the entire structure sways. So yes, his protection is physical, but more than that, it is structural, it is regional, it is systemic. The next time a foreign envoy considers destabilizing him, they must weigh not just his life, but the fallout of a regional explosion. This is what makes the AES unprecedented. It is a declaration that African sovereignty will no longer be practiced in isolation. It will be defended in unison. Every revolution has a visible front. Speeches, marches, uniforms, flags. But Traoré's survival depends not just on what's seen, but on what stays hidden. In a region where coups erupt overnight, most leaders react. They scramble, they panic. Traoré doesn't react, because he already knows. Before a whisper becomes a rumor, before a rumor becomes a plan, before a hand reaches for the trigger, someone inside his circle has already heard it. This is not ordinary intelligence, this is penetration. Burkina Faso's new internal security structure under Traoré is not bloated. It is not built on protocol. It is not distracted by foreign training manuals. It is built for speed, silence, surgical response. Forget glass buildings and analysts in suits. This network is made of field operatives, battle-tested, ideologically aligned, and trained to detect betrayal before it breathes. They don't just monitor threats, they dissolve them. And when they strike, it's quiet. No press conferences, no citywide lockdowns, just disappearances. Whispers gone mid-sentence. Plots that unravel before the ink dries. Since Traoré took power, several coup attempts have emerged. Some backed by high-ranking officers, others involving civilians with foreign financing. Every single time, the conspirators were arrested without a shot fired. There were no public manhunts, no chaotic breakdowns. Just one constant message: we saw you coming. That's not surveillance, that's infiltration. It's why trust, even among his enemies, has crumbled. No one knows who's listening. No one knows who's loyal. This climate of uncertainty may sound ruthless, but in a country fighting insurgency, corruption, and neo-colonial claws, security is not a luxury, it's oxygen. And the net doesn't stop at Burkina Faso's borders. Traoré's intelligence network has eyes on diplomatic missions. Certain embassies have quietly reduced staff. Development experts have been expelled without headlines. Digital trails are followed. Suspicious financial transfers are flagged. Travel patterns are dissected. Even humanitarian organizations are watched. Not out of paranoia, but because foreign intervention often wears many masks. Yet this is not just about interception. It's about discrediting threats before they become credible. When rumors surface, they are often followed by anonymous leaks. Screenshots of messages, voice notes, secret meetings exposed on social media. Whether real or planted, the effect is devastating. It spreads doubt among the plotters, among their sponsors, and among the people. It spreads trust. Because the regime doesn't just react to danger, it anticipates it. And nothing scares power more than an enemy who moves in silence. Still, even the most effective intelligence needs a fuel source, a fire, a reason to care. For Traoré's shadow network, that fire is not salary, it's belief. They're not protecting a man. They're guarding an idea that whispers never again. Ibrahim Traore is not just protected by guns, not just by tanks or uniforms, not just by border alliances or silent operatives. He is protected by something that no coup can crush, no bribe can buy, no drone can detect. He is protected by belief, and that belief has 5 layers, each forged in fire. First, the army, not bought by fear but built by presence. Soldiers who remember him not from posters but from battlefields. Second, the people. Mothers who will surround his palace before soldiers do. Youth who paint murals without being told. Diasporas who wire funds not to a party but to a purpose. Third, the alliance. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso standing not in parallel but in one formation. An attack on him is now a regional detonation. Fourth, the shadow. Intelligence agents who don't just watch, they infiltrate. They plant seeds of doubt before coups become conversations. They move like wind and leave silence where betrayal once lived. But the final shield is not military, is not strategic. It's ideological. It's Sankara, or rather what Sankara left behind: a code, a fire, a refusal. Traoré doesn't imitate him, he continues him. He said, "We will never be colonized again." Those words weren't just defiance, they were inheritance. And now, across Burkina Faso, children say those words with raised fists. Farmers whisper them as they plant in reclaimed land. Teachers inscribe them on chalkboards. Activists sew them into protest banners. This is not nostalgia, it's a passing of the torch. You can remove a leader, you can rewrite a constitution, but you can't erase conviction once it becomes cultural memory. Traoré may fall. No revolution is immune. But if he does, 1,000 voices will rise to replace him. Because they're not just guarding a man, they're guarding what it means to finally stand. And for the first time in decades, Africa isn't whispering. It's roaring. Not for aid, not for permission, but for itself. Do you believe that belief can stop bullets? Can a nation's soul become its strongest weapon? Tell us what you think. And if this vision of Africa moves you, if you believe it's time to tell a different story, then stand with us. In Africa, we've grown up with two kinds of silence. The first is the hush that follows a gunshot when neighbors close their windows, mothers count their children, and radios go mute. The second is the deeper silence, the one that comes from erasure, when history forgets your name, when dignity is stripped from textbooks, when you are told over and over that freedom is a Western luxury, not a black birthright. But today in Burkina Faso, that silence is breaking. I speak not as a journalist nor an analyst. I speak as an African. I have seen presidents rise like suns, only to set in the arms of foreign powers. I've watched liberation movements become luxury movements, champagne revolutions for elites who speak of sovereignty while dining in Paris. I've seen democracy turned into theater, where the ballots are counted, but the people don't count. But something in Traoré challenges that script. It's not just his age, though. He is young enough to understand TikTok and old enough to carry scars. It's not just his rhetoric, though. He speaks in the kind of straight lines that don't twist in translation. It's not even his military record, though. That too is carved in fire. It's that he walks barefoot on the same burning earth as the rest of us. When the rains failed in the Sahel and the crops shriveled, he didn't wait for UN reports or donor pledges. He asked what we could plant that grows in dry soil. He spoke not of dependency, but of drought-resistant hope. And when coups erupted, when every headline screamed instability, he reminded us that the real instability is a continent with trillions beneath the ground, but no clean water above it. Traoré didn't promise us paradise. He promised us our hands back. You see, belief isn't built in speeches. It's built in sweat, in women who rise before the sun to sell groundnuts on the roadside, in boys who study by candlelight because the grid never reaches their village, in grandmothers who still remember the smell of colonial boots and will not let that stench return. It's in that space between memory and hunger that belief is born. That's why Traoré scares them. Not because he has nukes or oil or Wall Street leverage, but because he has something more dangerous. He has convinced a people that they don't need permission to rise, and that is the nightmare of empire. Because empire can handle guns, it can even handle elections, but it cannot handle a mind that refuses to kneel. In Africa, we've long been taught that survival means compromise, that to live another day, we must nod politely while our resources are looted, our currencies dictated, and our narratives edited. But something is shifting. In classrooms, children now recite Sankara not as folklore, but as blueprint. In churches and mosques, preachers echo words of defiance, not defeat. In WhatsApp threads, farmers share tips on self-sustenance, not foreign subsidies. And in Ouagadougou, a man stands not alone, but as the flame lit by 1,000 matchsticks. Traoré is not perfect. No leader is. But perfection is not what we seek. We seek integrity. We seek someone who bleeds when we bleed, who doesn't flinch when the West flexes, who understands that the true currency of leadership is not GDP, but dignity. He doesn't just challenge the global order. He challenges our internalized inferiority. He makes us ask, what if we were never poor? What if we were simply pillaged? What if the chains were never broken, just repainted? This is not just a Burkina story. This is an African pulse, and it's growing louder. From the gold mines of Ghana to the fields of Mozambique, from Congolese classrooms to Sudanese streets, young Africans are watching, learning, organizing, because they see something that has long been absent, A leader who doesn't just speak of Africa. He listens to her heartbeat. And that heartbeat is no longer a whisper. It's a war drum. I am African. And for the first time in my life, I believe that belief is enough. Not to win the war in one day, but to never again surrender without a fight. They can mock us, sanction us, isolate us, but they cannot unsee what has now been seen. They cannot unknow what has now been known. And above all, they cannot unfeel what has begun to stir in our souls. Because we are done asking for seats at foreign tables. We are building our own, carved not of mahogany but of memory, nailed not by diplomacy but by defiance, polished not with polish but with purpose. If Ibrahim Traore falls tomorrow, let them know. He was not the revolution, he was the spark, and Africa has become dry wood. When this video ends, your screen might go black. But for many viewers, especially across Africa, that darkness doesn't signal silence. It signals thought. Because what begins as a story about one man often ends as a mirror, a reflection, a reckoning. And for many of us watching not as spectators but as Africans, the question that lingers isn't, what did Traore do? It's what have we tolerated? The comments fill fast, not with emojis or applause, but with confessions, with anger, with questions that have waited decades to be asked. Why do our leaders fly to Paris for validation, but never visit the rural clinics in their own provinces? Why do our children learn more about French revolutions than African resistance? Why are our soldiers better trained to salute foreign generals than to defend their own grandmothers? For many, watching this isn't entertainment, it's education. Not the kind taught in institutions funded by World Bank loans, but the kind whispered in taxi ranks, debated at market stalls, and shouted from university dorm rooms at midnight. I never knew we could say no, writes a young man from Benin. I thought sovereignty was just a word in the anthem, says a teacher in Zambia. This gave me chills, posts a student in the UK diaspora. It made me feel like we still have a choice. That's the power of visibility. Not the polished kind that comes from press conferences, but the raw, unfiltered kind that erupts when people see their pains spoken out loud, and not in apology but in protest. Traore didn't just confront foreign interests. He confronted our numbness. He forced us to feel again. To feel betrayal not as a historical footnote, but as a present condition. To feel rage not as chaos, but as clarity. To feel hope not as naivety, but as necessity. Because when we look at Burkina Faso, we don't just see a country under siege. We see ourselves. We see the stolen cobalt of Congo powering phones that never ring for justice. We see the IMF loans that build highways to export wealth, but no roads to reach our mothers. We see the oil of Nigeria flaring in the night while families cook with firewood. And in Traore's defiance, we see the whisper that's been growing in us. What if we stopped complying? What if we asked not for permission but for accountability? What if our leaders feared us more than they feared sanctions? This video becomes more than a documentary. It becomes therapy, because trauma unspoken becomes tradition. But once spoken, once named, it becomes a map, a way out. And that's why these stories matter. Because they don't just document history, they disrupt it. In the last 10 minutes, a mother in Senegal texted this video to her son. A group of students in Cameroon paused their lesson to replay the segment on sovereignty. An Uber driver in Johannesburg nodded through tears, whispering, "We need one of him here." And in diaspora homes from Brixton to the Bronx, African families sat a little straighter, their children asking, who was Sankara? That question alone is revolution. Because our future doesn't hinge on new policies, it hinges on new memory. Memory that connects not to pain, but to purpose. That's what this audience teaches us. That views aren't metrics, they're mirrors. That behind every screen is a citizen wondering, if they can rise, why can't we? And here's the truth. Revolution is not contagious. It's cumulative. It doesn't spread like a virus. It builds like a tide. Every video, every conversation, every mural painted in defiance adds weight. And one day that weight becomes impossible to ignore. That's why governments fear art. Why censors fear voice. Why foreign embassies monitor channels like this. Because they know what we are just beginning to remember. That the most powerful weapon in Africa is not oil or diamonds or even the ballot box. It's the imagination of a people who've stopped believing the lie. And that's the lesson of this audience. We are no longer passive. We are processing. We are questioning why our passports come with more visa rejections than rights. Why our leaders smile more at G20 summits than at local clinics. Why our minerals leave on schedule but our dreams never arrive. We are not angry because of Traoré. We are angry because we know what we deserve. We are not inspired because of his speeches. We are inspired because we've heard our own voices in his silence. So what now? What happens after the video fades? That's not for Traoré to answer. That's for us. Will we keep forwarding these clips? Will we join the WhatsApp groups, the reading circles, the street talks? Will we stop laughing when friends joke that Africa can't change? Will we challenge corruption in our homes, not just in our halls? Will we raise children who know that dignity is not Western, but ancestral? The answers are not simple, but they are ours to write. This video is not the end of a story. It's the start of a syllabus. And the first lesson, that we, the audience, are not watching history. We are shaping it, one view at a time. To the world watching from afar, what you've just seen may feel like a local story, a footnote in the theater of geopolitics, a curious chapter in Africa's ever-complicated saga. But let me tell you plainly, this is not about Burkina Faso. This is about the mirror that Africa now holds to the world, and it does not flatter. For decades, the global narrative has been carefully curated. Africa is unstable. Africa is dependent. Africa is corrupt. And therefore, Africa must be managed, guided, contained. But what happens when Africa stops apologizing? What happens when the continent refuses to play the role written for it? Ibrahim Traore is not your traditional protagonist. He doesn't seek applause from Brussels or validation from the New York Times. He does not dine with Davos elites or quote from Harvard manuals. He is in many ways an interruption, a disruption in the global algorithm, and that is precisely why he matters. Because for far too long, the world has measured African progress by how well it mimics Western norms. Good governance meant obeying IMF prescriptions. Democracy meant periodic elections, regardless of who truly holds power. Development meant accepting aid, however conditional, however extractive. But Traoré flipped the script.